In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on February 17, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start. If you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Wisconsin versus Ohio State. Big Ten basketball in mid-February hits a little different, and this one fits that mood perfectly. A ranked Wisconsin group walks in carrying an 18-7 overall mark and a 10-4 record in league play, sitting at number 24 in the country and very aware that every game now nudges their seed line up or down. Ohio State is at 16-9 and 8-6 in the conference, living in that stressful neighborhood where every possession feels like it belongs on a tournament resume, not just a box score. The spread is small, the talent is real on both sides, and the pressure in that building will feel a little like a pressure cooker in a campus rec center, loud, close, and personal. Wisconsin has shifted from the old slow grind reputation into something a lot more modern, and honestly, a lot more fun. The ball moves, shooters space the floor, and you can feel that they actually enjoy playing in rhythm instead of just hunting late clock mid-range looks. They still value possessions, they still value discipline, but now there is a real gear when they decide to push and punish mismatches, and that has shown up in how often they put big numbers on decent defenses. That change matters when you compare it to an Ohio State team that feels stuck between identities, part veteran, part patched together, still dangerous but not always sure which version will show up from night to night. On paper, this would seem like a classic home spot for Ohio State, the bubble team with its back against the wall, the crowd behind them, desperate to grab a statement win. In practice, the recent stretch tells a slightly different story, a run of games where they have bounced between wins and losses without ever really catching a strong wave of momentum. The rhythm has been choppy, and the roster has taken some hits, with a key scoring guard out indefinitely with a hand issue, a senior forward sidelined by a lingering foot problem, a big man still working back from a serious knee injury, and a freshman guard parked in a redshirt year. That is a lot of strain on a rotation that still wants to play at a high major level every night, especially against opponents that can stretch you out and force constant closeouts. Wisconsin has already shown that it can handle this matchup when the pieces are in place. That earlier meeting in Madison was not decided by some miracle finish. It was the product of a team that controlled the game, scored freely, and managed the pressure late. Since then, the Badgers have backed that up with strong wins over top-level conference opponents, using the same basic formula: purposeful offense, confident shooting, and enough toughness on the glass to finish possessions. When a team repeatedly does that against serious competition, it stops looking like a hot streak and starts looking like who they are. Ohio State still has talent, still has pride, and still has the home crowd, and that cannot be brushed aside. But the thinning depth puts more weight on every starter, more responsibility on every possession, and that often shows up most against disciplined, well-spaced teams that refuse to beat themselves. Wisconsin brings that stubborn, no-nonsense approach, and when you mix in their current form and the fact that they have already solved this puzzle once, the path to them covering a small number becomes very clear, even if it will not be comfortable for 90% of the night. As our first pick for this matchup, the Wisconsin Badgers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Scoring-wise, this matchup comes with a reputation already attached, and it is a loud one. People see Wisconsin putting big numbers on the board and remember how wild that first game felt, and the instinct is to expect another shootout and another track meet. The recent box scores definitely feed that feeling, with the Badgers rolling through good teams by simply outscoring them and leaning into their new, free-flowing style. It is easy to look at that and think, here we go again, both teams racing up and down and the scoreboard barely keeping up. Here is the thing, totals are not about what a team can do in a vacuum, they are about how this specific game is likely to breathe. Ohio State, on paper, still carries an offense that can score, but the paper version of the roster is not the one actually playing right now. Missing that high-usage guard means less shot creation out of nothing. Losing the senior forward cuts into flexibility and physicality. The big still recovering from the knee issue changes how they can protect the rim and run, and the redshirting freshman takes away another potential spark. That kind of attrition does not always show up in a single play. It builds over time, in how fast you are willing to play, in how long you can keep pressure on the gas before fatigue and fouls whisper that it might be smarter to slow things down. Recent home games for Ohio State have quietly hinted at that, with a pattern of totals that lean lower when the number on the board is ambitious. Not everyone has been slow, but several have turned into tighter, more defense-conscious battles, especially against quality opponents who are comfortable playing in the half court. That is not an accident. It is what happens when a team that still wants to win has to be a bit more selective with pace because the bench is not as deep as it was supposed to be. Coaches feel that, players feel that, and game plans shift in small ways that add up to fewer possessions. February in this conference is its own character in every story. Legs are tired, scouting reports are thick, and coaches have seen almost every set an opponent likes to run. In games that mean as much as this one, where one side is fighting for a better seed and the other is fighting to stay in the conversation, you often see more timeouts, more controlled possessions, and more half-court chess. Everyone talks about wanting to run, but when the stakes are high, it is amazing how often both teams start valuing each trip a little more, even if they do not admit that out loud. The first meeting lighting up the scoreboard actually helps the case for a lower scoring script this time. Both staffs will remember how quickly that one opened up, and both will look for ways to avoid giving the other team that same comfort again. Defenses usually respond by staying home on shooters a bit more, being more selective with help, and trying to turn the game into more of a grind. When you combine those adjustments with Ohio State's current depth situation and the natural late-season drag, the total starts to feel a little inflated compared to how this game is likely to actually flow. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. UCLA versus Michigan State. UCLA heads to East Lansing to face Michigan State on Tuesday, February 17, 2026 at the Breslin Center. The whole thing feels like classic midwinter Big Ten basketball, cold air outside, bright lights inside, and a visiting group trying to adjust to a building that seems to buzz before warm-ups even finish. The road trip itself matters more than people admit. The time change, the different daily rhythm, the way a new arena messes a little with depth perception on jumpers, all of that slowly chips away at the comfort level that players normally rely on. The Breslin Center leans into that discomfort. The student section stands on top of the floor. Every minor run from the home side sounds bigger than it is, and suddenly a normal possession can feel like it carries the weight of a late March moment. Michigan State usually embraces that mood with a style that leans on strong half-court sets, tough defense, and a willingness to make every cut, screen, and box out feel like a small collision, which wears on a visiting team that has already spent hours on a plane and bus. Honestly, that kind of game is exhausting in a very specific way. It is not just about running up and down, it is the mental grind of executing in noisy huddles, trying to call out switches over the roar, and staying locked in while the home crowd reacts to every whistle as if it were a turning point. Late in the conference schedule, those emotional layers usually get thicker, seeding conversations heat up. Every game feels like it could swing perception, and a proud home program tends to lean into that pressure rather than shy away from it. Games in that setting often tilt from simple 2- or 3-point squeakers into nights where the home side, if it handles its business, can stretch a lead once legs and focus start to separate, especially in the final 5 minutes when poise and familiarity with the floor really show up. As our first pick for this matchup, the Michigan State Spartans to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Looking at how this one could play out on the scoreboard, the first instinct might be to picture a slow, bruising Big Ten battle where every possession feels like pulling teeth, but those games do not always stay as low scoring as the reputation suggests. Here is the thing, modern college offenses are far more comfortable letting it fly from 3, stretching the floor, and turning one missed box out or lazy pass into a quick 5-point swing, so scoring can pile up even when the game feels ugly. Long jumpers mean long rebounds, and long rebounds often mean runouts, so even a matchup that starts in a half-court rhythm can suddenly flip into quick transition spurts that put extra points on the board. If the score lives in that uncomfortable 2 or 3 possession zone for long stretches, coaches usually lean into timeouts, tactical fouls, and aggressive attacks at the rim, which pull more free throws into the mix and stop the clock while the numbers keep ticking upward. Honestly, anyone who has watched enough late-season college hoops has seen the same pattern: a quiet first 10 minutes where both teams feel each other out, followed by a second half where foul trouble, fatigue, and a little desperation from one side or the other turn every drive into a whistle and every foul into 2 more chances at the line. Those late-game sequences, where a team keeps extending the game with fouls, hunting a miracle comeback, can take what once looked like a controlled, modest scoring night and turn it into something that sneaks past what people expected when they first saw the matchup on the board. With both teams competing in an era that rewards spacing, pace changes, and quick trigger shooting, this kind of conference clash has plenty of ways to stack points quietly, not through a track meet, but through a steady stream of trips to the line, transition bursts, and second-chance putbacks that add up much faster than they seem in the moment. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Nebraska versus Iowa, Carver Hawkeye Arena on a February night, national television, and you have a top 10 Nebraska squad walking into Iowa City as the slight road underdog. It feels like classic Big Ten theater: loud student section, tight whistles, and that sense that every possession might swing the mood of the entire building. Nebraska comes in sitting at 22-3 overall and 11-3 in the conference, right in that national top 10 conversation and living through one of the best seasons the program has experienced in roughly 60 years. This is not just a cute storyline about a surprise team. It is a group that has been stacking real, grown-up wins. Iowa, on the other hand, is at 18-7 overall and 8-6 in league play, with a 12-2 mark at home that explains why the line still leans their way in their own gym. The book respects Carver, and honestly, it should. That place has flipped many good teams inside out over the years. Here is the thing: once you peel back the noise and the nostalgia, Nebraska has the exact profile you want when you are catching points on the road. They are winning games by more than 13 points a night, holding opponents under 40% shooting and around 67 points, and still scoring just under 80 themselves. That kind of balance, where your offense hums and your defense actually gets stops, is the sort of thing that survives bus rides, plane trips, and hostile crowds. They take care of the ball, sitting at roughly a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio, which is basically the basketball equivalent of showing up to an exam already having seen half the questions. The market still leans into the familiar story of Iowa at home, and you can see why. The Hawkeyes score close to 78 a game, shoot over 50% from the floor, and when they get rolling, it can look like a highlight reel waiting for the next clip. That is exactly why the number tilts toward them, though their strengths are built into the price. Nebraska's strengths, the grind, the poise, the way they string together stops, those are easier for casual eyes to miss in a box score on ESPN or a quick glance at a sportsbook app. Recent form quietly tilts toward Nebraska as well, and not in a subtle way. They have been racking up wins, something like 17-3 in their last 20, and they have been very friendly to tickets on the road, covering in 7 of their last 8 away from home. That kind of consistency suggests a team that does not care much about the logo on the other baseline or the noise coming from behind the bench. Iowa, for all its talent and energy under a first-year head coach, is still in that phase of figuring out late-game situations and high-leverage moments in this new system. Nebraska feels more like the veteran poker player at the table, not always loud, not always flashy, but quietly taking pot after pot while everyone else chases the big hand. When the stronger season-long resume, the sturdier defense, and the late-season urgency all sit on the side that is taking the points instead of giving them, it creates a very clear picture of which locker room has the more reliable path to paying off a ticket. As our first pick for this matchup, the Nebraska Cornhuskers to cover the spread as underdogs is our full-game side pick. Both offenses score in that upper 70s range, one shooting over 50% from the floor, the other knocking down something like 11 threes a night, so the first instinct is to expect a track meet. Books know that instinct well, so the total gets set in a way that feels like a challenge, almost asking you if you are brave enough to ride with the fireworks. History in this arena absolutely leans toward points, which is part of what makes this total so tempting. The recent meetings between these teams in Iowa City have tilted to the higher side, with several straight games landing above the number, and Iowa games in general have leaned to the over lately. But if you only look at that, it feels like you should just grab the over, sit back, and cheer for made shots. Let me explain why that first impulse can be a trap here. This particular Nebraska team is not a reckless run-and-gun outfit, even if the scoring numbers are shiny. They hold opponents under 40% from the field and around that mid-60s range in points, which is serious work in a power conference. Iowa's opponents sit in the low 60s as well, which tells you that for all the love their offense gets, there is some backbone on the defensive end too. Two teams that can actually guard turn games from pure sprint into something closer to a series of half-court puzzles. Odds makers have already shaded the total down from what you might expect if you just added up the raw scoring averages and called it a day. Even with that adjustment, Nebraska games have still been landing under more often than not, cashing the lower side in a large majority of their recent outings. That pattern hints at a team that controls tempo, values possessions, and does not always let opponents drag them into a pace war. Sometimes the scoreboard suggests chaos, but the game flow feels more like chess. Late February in the Big Ten tends to squeeze the air out of games as well. Rotations tighten, coaches ride their trusted guys longer, and every empty trip feels heavier with conference standings and seeding on the line. Both teams know that a cold 3-minute stretch can decide a night, so you see more patient half-court sets, more deliberate actions, and fewer wild runouts unless they are absolutely free. It is less about putting on a show and more about making sure the next possession is not the one that ends your chance at a league title push. All of that stacks up into a matchup where the public story screams offense, but the underlying reality keeps pulling things toward a more controlled, lower-scoring rhythm, the kind of game where stops matter a little more than highlights and where every empty possession nudges the total downward just a bit. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Georgia versus Kentucky. Rupp Arena on a weeknight in February always feels like a truth serum game for Kentucky, and this one fits that vibe perfectly. Two teams sitting at 17-8 with tournament dreams and a little bit of pressure walk-in, but only one fan base is going to walk out feeling calm about March. Kentucky has already taken its lumps early in league play, yet recently they have turned those into lessons, tightening rotations, leaning into what they do well, and letting this crowd carry them when legs get heavy. That loss at Florida stung, but it also sharpened the edges, and you can almost feel this one setting up as a response spot rather than a sulk spot. Georgia strolls in playing the part of the fun chaos team, that group everyone loves to watch on a neutral floor but does not exactly trust in a true road cauldron when possessions really matter. They score in bunches, they fire early in the shot clock, and when the jumper is falling they look like they could hang with almost anyone. But the flip side is real. Those same quick shots can turn into long rebounds, runouts, and 4-point swings before you even finish a sip of your drink. You see it in their recent run, big scoring nights wrapped inside losses, where they give themselves a chance with offense but let it slip when they need 2 or 3 hard defensive stands in a row. Kentucky, by contrast, has leaned into something much sturdier lately. They are still plenty explosive, but the bigger story is how they have embraced that blend of man and zone, using length, communication, and a bit of attitude to become one of the stingier defenses in the conference. That identity matters more than any one hot shooting night because it travels from possession to possession and it lets them survive stretches when the jumpers rim out. At home, with that defense humming, you can almost see them methodically squeezing Georgia's comfort zone tighter and tighter, taking away the easy rim runs, forcing one more pass, and turning a track meet into something much closer to a stress test. Then you look at the pieces and how they fit. Kentucky has the steady creation on the ball, the wing scoring that can bail out a late clock, and the interior size that can win the glass without sending extra help every time the shot goes up. Georgia has shot makers, but Kentucky has more ways to win a possession, whether that is a straight-line drive, a post touch that forces a double, or simply a mature decision to pull it out and make Georgia guard again. In a game where the spread asks you to believe one side can steadily separate, not just edge it in the final minute, the team that defends cleaner, values the ball a bit more, and leans on a deeper set of answers is usually the side you want to ride. And right now, with how Kentucky's form, scheme, and home edge are all lining up, that picture points pretty clearly in one direction. As our first pick for this matchup, the Kentucky Wildcats to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The funny thing with this matchup is that even if you trust Kentucky to control things more often than not, it is very hard to make a case for a quiet scoreboard. Georgia simply does not do quiet. They live in games where the pace pops, the ball is sprayed around, and both teams are being dragged into long nights of closeouts and rotations. Their offense is built on tempo and volume, not on squeezing every ounce out of a 30-second possession, and that style tends to drag opponents into the deep end with them, whether those opponents like swimming that fast or not. You see the pattern in their recent results. Even when they lose, the numbers on the board are loud. Trips to places like Oklahoma or tough home dates have turned into shootouts where both sides land punches because Georgia keeps firing and keeps attacking, even if they have just given up a run on the other end. They do not slow down because they are behind. If anything, they push harder, which is great for viewers and, honestly, great for people who like points. Kentucky, for their part, is not some grind-it-to-a-halt group anymore. They still defend with real purpose, but they also have multiple guards who can push, shooters who stretch the floor in transition, and bigs who sprint the lane and punish defenses that are even a half step late getting organized. We just watched them play in a game where both teams flew up and down, and even in a loss, their side of the scoreboard never felt stuck for long. They might talk about valuing each possession, and they do, but they also understand that with this roster, an up-tempo rhythm is not a bad thing. Put those two styles together and you get a matchup where long scoring droughts feel unlikely on either side. Georgia's spacing and willingness to shoot from deep forces rotations, which leads to fouls, which leads to free throws. And free throws are the quiet fuel of high totals. Kentucky's physicality at the rim has a similar effect because once the refs set a whistle tone, drivers from both teams start leaning into contact, and suddenly every empty trip turns into at least a chance at points. End of halves and end of game sequences usually help, too, with intentional fouls, timeouts, and designed sets turning those final minutes into a parade of possessions instead of a slow fade to the buzzer. So even if Kentucky locks in defensively more than Georgia does, the combination of pace, shot making, transition chances, and late game theory all stack in the same direction toward a script where the scoreboard operator is getting a real workout. If you like basketball that looks more like a modern Southeastern Conference track meet than an old-school rock fight, this one checks all the boxes for a game that can sail past a typical scoring expectation rather than creep toward it. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. LSU versus Texas. LSU walks into Austin like that friend claiming everything is fine while the whole room can tell things are wobbling a bit. Recent form tells on them because this stretch has been rough, and it shows in how fragile they look when a game tilts even slightly against them. Over their last 6 outings, they have managed only one win, and those double-digit losses to Florida, Mississippi State, Arkansas, and Tennessee linger like a hangover on the schedule. It is not just the margin, it is how quickly those games slipped once LSU got punched a couple of times, which is a bad habit to bring into a loud road environment against a confident group. Texas, on the other hand, feels like the host that spent all week getting the place ready and now wants to show it off. 5 wins in their last 6, solid results against Georgia, South Carolina, and Ole Miss, plus that comfortable 17-point road win at Missouri, all point to a team that knows exactly who it is right now. Their attack has the kind of balance that gives bettors a warm feeling, scoring in the mid-80s per game on efficient shooting, living in that top 25 neighborhood for both scoring and field goal percentage. They have size, they have wings who can hurt you from multiple spots, and they have the sort of international flavor and versatility that makes matchups feel like chess instead of checkers. In a packed building, that style usually scales up, not down. The real knot for LSU is what happens when its defense has to live play after play against that sort of offense. They have been allowing north of 75 points a night, bleeding quality looks from the arc, and struggling on the defensive glass, which means opponents are not just getting one crack at the rim, they are getting a second and sometimes a third. Texas, by contrast, cleans the boards at a top 50 level and happily marches to the free throw line, which is exactly where you want to live when you are already expected to play from in front. Add in the fact that LSU's backcourt is not fully stocked after a key guard was lost for the season with a foot surgery, and the backcourt battle tilts even more toward the home side in a way that shows up in ball security, decision-making, and who controls late possessions. Odds makers have already treated Texas as a clear favorite at home, and when you lay out the current form, efficiency edge, rebounding gap, and depth, it reads much more like a spot where the favorite has room to stretch than one where they are sweating every whistle in the final minute. As our first pick for this matchup, the Texas Longhorns to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On paper, you have two teams that are very comfortable seeing big numbers on the scoreboard, with Texas living in the mid-80s per night and LSU hovering a little over 80, both shooting at clips that make defenses wince before tip-off. You add those averages together and, even before talking about pace or whistles, you land in a range that suggests a fun total rather than a grind. It is the kind of setup where fans reach for another drink instead of the remote. Texas games have already leaned that way for much of the season. They have sailed past the number 15 times, and 4 of their last 5 have gone higher than projected, including shootouts against Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, and Missouri. That pattern does not just scream good offense, it hints at rhythm, spacing, and confidence. Where the ball zips, early shots are not feared, and the first made 3 often leads to a few more. Teams like that rarely slow down just because the calendar says February. LSU's track record on totals looks different at a glance, with more games creeping under than flying over, but the split makes sense when you peel it back. When they run into opponents that want to play faster and have firepower, like South Carolina and Arkansas, the game tends to open up and their contests climb. When they get dragged into matchups where they are simply outgunned and smothered, things bog down and the under sneaks in, not so much because they suddenly guard, but because they cannot keep up. Against another high-functioning offense, that story tilts back toward pace and points. Stylistically, this particular pairing leans toward the scoreboard working overtime. You have an efficient attack on one side and a defense on the other that has been leaking over 75 points, giving up comfortable three-point looks and surrendering too many second-chance opportunities. Both teams are willing to foul, which is annoying for coaches but wonderful for a total because the clock stops and players stroll to the stripe where points can stack quietly. Free throws are often the hidden sauce in a high-scoring game, and here they are very much in play. Game flow also works in favor of a lively total. If the contest stays reasonably close, coaches will lean on quick sets, early offense, and late shot clock threes, trying to squeeze out every possession. If the margin grows at any point, the trailing side will naturally speed things up, launch more threes, and extend the game with fouls, while bench players from both teams push hard trying to earn more minutes and their own highlights. That mix, early rhythm plus late chaos, usually nudges a matchup away from a defensive slugfest and toward the kind of up-and-down affair that fans remember on the scoreboard first. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.